I didn't even. Boom, boom, boom. All right, today what we're doing is we're gonna go through the forms. If ever you get stuck on a form, what should you do?
I'll read it.
Read it. The answers are usually right in the form. These are the forms that we'll start using on the 17th. All the other forms will be, hopefully they're gone, but these are they'll say 0824 on them. I have the new forms without the samples. They look like this. However, we're going to use these so you can see where the differences are. Sound good? What's that? Can you get one? Maybe I'll share at the end because you guys can. We'll see. The challenge with sharing them out right now is that if we have different people using them and others not using them, and they're not on the MLS, and so that was kind of the spot. But yeah, the review. All right. Facilitator services agreement. What is a facilitator? Remember going through your agency disclosure, what's a facilitator? Is it a fiduciary? No. Is it an agent relationship? Yes. It is different than being a customer, right? What do you owe a facilitator? Start to see. Confidentiality. That's right. That's what you owe a facilitator. Can you list a property and be a facilitator? No, you cannot. You cannot be a listing agent and a facilitator at the same time. That's a big question. Hey, I'm doing a listing. Someone came through. They don't have an agent. Can I just facilitate it for them? The answer is no. Can they just be a customer? Sure. Right? And they need to understand, look, you have no representation. I represent my own side. You don't have any representation there. You are a customer. Can they be a dual agent? Can you be a dual agent? Yes, yeah. You can represent both. What happens when you represent both? What's that? Dual agency. And what does dual agency mean?
The brokerage is representing both sides of it equally, so you can only suggest things, but you really can't offer suggestions of what to do. You present the information and that's kind of, then they make a decision.
Right. What happens is you owe both fiduciary duties to both sides. You can't act at the detriment of the other party. That's what that is. So can you say, oftentimes, this is what an offer might look like. You can say some of that stuff. You can give that kind of thing. Someone says, hey, what should I offer on this house? And you know what the other side's going to take. Can you share that information? No. Right. No. Let's say you have a client and then I have a client. Are we in dual? You have a listing. I bring a buyer to your house. Are we in dual agency relationship? Yes. Let's say you have a listing, a Keller Williams Edina, where Matt Brady is at, brings an agent to your house. Do you have dual agency? No. The only people you have dual agency with are our office, KW Lake Minnetonka Premier Realty, or other way around, Premier Realty. I should know that, huh? Yeah, I should know that. Yeah, so facilitator agreement. The only thing that changes on the facilitator agreement, which most of you do not have, but this is going to be the common theme right here. A broker may not receive compensation for brokerage services provided to the broker from any source that exceeds the amount of rate, exceeds the amount or rate agreed to in this contract. What that means is if you don't put a broker admin fee on here, you cannot charge a broker admin fee. If you put 2.5 on there and the other side gives you 2.7, you cannot take 2.7. You can only take the amount that's on the agreement. Good? Starting April 15th, actually April 17th, but April 15th is what, oh, sorry, thank you. Those A's are a challenge for me. August 15th, August 17th, both, right? August 15th, I say that date because that's when the MLS will change. You'll see the things on there. August 17th is when we are legally bound to make these changes. August 17th, your buyer calls you, or a buyer calls you and says, I want to see a house. What do you say?
We need to meet first.
You say, fantastic. I would love to show you a property, right? As part of that, what's the first thing I gotta do all the time? Agency, not, that doesn't change all the time. I mean, that doesn't change anyway. So, right? So if you're meeting with someone, even in the past, if you're meeting with someone, before you take them into the house and you learn the things that they want about the property, you must disclose agency. Great. Now you also, before you're allowed to show a house, okay? If you're the listing agent, you cannot present your house to an unrepresented buyer. If you are a buyer's person, you cannot take someone in a house as an unrepresented buyer until you have an agreement, okay? An agreement doesn't mean you have to have the exclusive agreement for a year, 6 months, whatever you do. It just means you have to have an agreement signed before you can take them into the house. Yesterday, Bethany sat down with Scott and Brahma, and they went through Bethany went through her buyer's consultation. If you're not doing a buyer's consultation, it's a great time to start doing a buyer's consultation because the market's changing anyway, right? So it's a great time to sit down, educate that person on why they want to work with you, the value that you bring, and go through the paperwork so that you have it. So one of the things that you might have is you might have a facilitator agreement as you go through. That's one of them. You have to have something. Good.
Kevin, I have a question. With that, you know, that it just, there's so much that seems crazy in this, but that whole idea about what we put down as our, I always get mixed up as far as what's the right wording for what we're getting. It's not commission, it's compensation, but whatever. Can we put 3% or less as noted, so then you can get up to that? Or how can we, there's gotta be a way.
You can, the rule says you cannot take more than that sheet. You can take less than that sheet, right? So
there we go. Okay.
Bethany said multiple times, I believe that this is actually an opportunity for agents to make more money rather than less money. Depends what perspective you have. You might have said, you know what, that 2.7% that we were seeing a lot, I'm worth more than that. And I can communicate why I'm worth more than that. So I'm going to put a commission rate of 3%. Then the buyers are willing to pay you 2.5%. If you're okay with that, you can take the 2.5%. You just can't take more. Everyone understand that? But also you can take 3% because you have an agreement now that says you're due 3%. Good? All right. We're going to skip this. This is the facilitator's agreement on the sell side, which we're going to just instead go through the listing side. By the way, Kelly just walked in. Kelly, you're with a company called Profile. Profile is a transaction management company that our office oftentimes work with. We have a relationship. Christy and Kelly have been in our office for a long time, and they are up to date. Kelly, actually, I have sent the forms to Kelly. She's seen the forms, and her team will be up and ready to help in this spot. So if you go, hey, I normally don't work with a transaction coordination company, but I need to start, I would say that's a great way to go. They're up to date on things like that, and they'll be moving along. All right, good. We're skipping this. So, question: when must you have an agreement with a buyer?
Before you show them home.
Before you show a home. The actual piece is before you start working for them and moving it along. So if you're setting them up on a MLS search, it's like, hey, I'm going to work for you, they should have an agreement, right? If you're touring a home, they must have an agreement. You're going to get fined by the MLS. And the MLS in our area, who's the one that hands out the fines, said, even if you're a listing agent, you cannot show a property to an unrepresented buyer without a buyer's agreement.
Are they going to catch us?
That's a good question. So when things have been done in the past, just know there are people that are evaluating realtors and the actions that they're taking, right? So I remember, I don't think, I was not the broker, but I think it was TL. I know at that time, they were coming and seeing if people were doing representation. So they had people touring open houses, they had people looking at people's signs, are we following rules there? And then they would fine you that way. The MLS is not making us turn in anything to the MLS, it says we have representation. But that comes if someone accuses you of not, then they will ask for everything that you had. That's how they do it. So the fine, the first time you mess up is $100. The next time it's over $1,000. So they're giving people chance to follow the rules. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there are people that work for the Department of Commerce that will secret shop you.
For sure.
So they will look like a consumer, they will act like a consumer. So don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and just know, my job as the broker is to make sure that we're following the rules. And if we're not following the rules, this guy gets in trouble along with you. So for my sake, let's follow the rules. That's why I'm doing as much as I can to make sure that we know what they are so that we follow them as we go on. Make sense?
I have a question on Zoom.
Yes.
What about an unrepresented buyer in an open house or the listing agent? Do we have to have them sign buyer representation to come in, or only let buyers in that are represented?
No, you do not. Open houses are a free time for people to come in. They are really open. Now, here's the deal. What might be important to have at that open house, which was always important to have? Agency, right? Because as soon as you talk about price, terms, motivation, you're learning stuff about them. And they, before that, should have at least a disclosure set up that says, hey, you can read it. By the way, it's your obligation to make sure it's available to them. It's not the law that they sign it. For our compliance, we ask that they sign it and return it to us. But to cover your spot, you want to make sure you at least have it available for them to see it. Good? So agency is always important. All right, I'm sitting down with a client. And we did this last time. There are 3 ways a buyer agent can be paid, right? The first way is, let's say we have a 3% contract. We took our 3% buyer agency, right? We now have an exclusive rep. The first one that we can pay is something that we already have, or we've done this oftentimes. And it says right on our exclusive rep form that we're already using and what will be used, whatever I'm paid by the co-op agent reduces or does not reduce the cost to me, right? Oftentimes I see reduces in there. So the co-op agent can pay buyer's broker, right? The seller can pay buyer's broker, right? Okay, this is a trick question because I done some research since the last time. How many of you think you can, let me do this one. The other way is that the buyer can pay buyer's broker. Who's getting paid?
Buyer broker.
Buyer's broker. All right, then the seller, okay, now we're gonna get to the financing piece, all right? On the PA cannot say, lending, how are people gonna get paid? The PA cannot say seller to contribute 3% to buyer's closing to cover this. That it cannot say. And that will mess up lending, that will mess up everything. So what lending has said is, let's say right now there's a 3% limit, right? On closing costs. This does not impact this, right? So let's say on your PA it says sellers will pay buyer broker 3%, seller will contribute 3% in closing costs. That can still happen. Okay? So there's 6% there. Lenders say that can happen. So issue will be, still has to appraise. Right? So it still has to appraise. Some of you, I want to say some of you, there might have been an assumption that should seller not pay, the buyer could finance the 3%. That is not true. According to Eric, getting clarity, he said we can do this, but we cannot do this. Eric is the lending guy with Superior. Supreme, sorry, not Superior, Supreme in Supreme Lending in our office. So if you want to see his, actually, I'll send out an email after this and it has his piece on it because I asked him for specific wording and he did it. So, so when your buyer comes and they have a cost, you want them to know, hey, it's going to cost 3% to work with me. That can be paid by the co-op agent. That may be paid by, we'll put it on the PA as a seller paying by closing costs. Or you might be responsible for bringing 3% additional to closing. Well, I don't have 3% addition. I understand most people don't. What we can do is we can look at my negotiations, working with the seller to compensate that. Sometimes we might have to raise up the list price 3% so that they net net the same amount of money that they would. Make sense? If it's cash, by the way, it takes some of these things out of there. You help them understand where the net is, how that's all going to work. This is going to be important. Net cost. What is this thing going to be costing me? How is it? And on the mortgage side, it oftentimes comes with, well, what's my payment going to be, right? And how much cash do I have to bring? Those are the things that are important usually to the buyer. On the sell side, you're going to want to get familiar with saying, well, let's look at what you net, right? So an offer that is, if we take this offer and it's 5% above any other offer, well, really, this one is still the wrong offer because there's costing 6%. So you really want to get good, and you guys should be doing these anyway. If I put that, what is this? Seller's net sheet. Nice, Chris. Good. So we should be doing those anyway, right? We got to be ready with all the understanding where we're at. All right. Okay, here we go. So here's the listing contract. I know that there's some anxiousness. By the way, one of the national companies has said, we're not going to do this, right? And it's created some buzz. Anyone part of like Facebook groups for realtors and different things, you've seen like how people are responding. Sometimes it's like that poopy brown color. Sometimes it's, they're just not excited about it. And some people are really excited about it. The great thing is there are options. In our market center, there are options as well. We are not saying you have to offer a co-op. Why are we not saying that you have to offer a co-op?
Client's decision.
It's a client's decision, right? That's right. It is a client's decision. We want you to have the best opportunity to work with clients. It's a client's decision how you're going to do that, right? Now, how many of you think this is the best way to do it? Co-op. Okay. If you believe so, then you have to understand why you believe that and be able to present that to your sellers, right? It might be something like, here's the deal. If we have this on the front end, we can advertise that. We know we can alleviate the buyer's concern right at the front. That might bring more people in. It's just a strategy that way, right? How many of you believe this is the best way? Anyone? I think this is a great way. That the seller is gonna compensate the buyer broker, and the reason is, go ahead.
Kind of similar.
They're similar in the fact that the seller is paying for that, right? The seller is paying. Sorry, the seller is already paid, negotiated with the co-op agent. The co-op agent is paying here, right? This is the seller's not negotiated with the co-op agent. They're not negotiating for you. You're gonna negotiate here. But both the seller is contributing to those. This one's different in that the seller's not taking on that cost, right? I kind of like this if I'm working with the seller is I can say, look, let's see how they come in, right? What's most important to the seller is what? The net, right? So if I'm at a spot where I want to negotiate my 8% listing, right? That's what I normally charge, 8% for a listing. And now I only have to negotiate 5% of that. And we'll let the buyer's agent come and negotiate the other side. That's great, right? That's great. If we have professionals on both sides of the spot, it makes a lot of sense. Sellers will understand that most people don't have this extra cash to come and purchase your house, right? If you're a listing agent, most listing agents are going to understand it's the net amount, just like asking for closing costs before. I'm going to ask for 3%. Great. Say we're going to give you a full price offer because we're asking for 3%, but we're giving you 3% above, right? It's just creating conversations that we get to have on both sides. So if I'm with the seller, I might say, look, it's going to make a lot of sense to compensate. However, let's look and see how those offers come in so that we can net you the most amount of money. By doing that, do I sound like a fiduciary to my client? Yeah. Who am I a fiduciary to? Am I a fiduciary to other buyer's agents? No, right? Do I know that it makes sense to work with other buyer agents? It's important to have cooperation. The likelihood of your home selling is going to have more people available to buy your house if you're compensating that other side, right? So there's wins there. We just got to know why we're choosing that one. This one, if your buyer says, look, I'm not going to pay a buyer side agent. You know what? That's great. I can understand that. I'm going to take your listing, and you know what's going to come on the purchase agreement? Is on there, and one of the terms it will say, seller pay buyer's agent. Now you get to decide, do you want to sell your house? Do you not want to sell your house, right? It's their choice. You get to decide who you're going to work with, but I think no matter what they say on the front end, there's a way to work through and help be a fiduciary for your clients and not be a jerk in our industry, right? We know that many of us who sell houses are also dependent on bringing buyers to houses, right? Many of us don't do just one side, whether it's our team whether we do, but our team doesn't do just one side. There's a way of making sure the industry moves forward. I think this is actually good for our industry. I don't know that I agree with why the lawsuit came and had to come, but I think there's some opportunity here that's really good for our industry. So when you're sitting down having a listing appointment, here's the form. Remember, if you're having a listing appointment in the past, you really don't have to change much. Right now, what's different is you're talking about the various ways of compensating. This first one is total broker compensation. Same wording that there's a spot they did it in April. There's April. They made a little change, and it's total compensation. Hey, what is a total compensation? Seller agrees to pay a broker retainer fee of. I often see 0. In fact, I always see 0. I don't. What a retainer fee means, even if the home doesn't sell, you retain the money. It goes in your brokerage. Retainer fees are interesting things. Sometimes they make sense, but very, very rarely. So oftentimes we see 0 in there, right? That next one, line 119, the seller shall pay broker as broker's compensation blank percent. You can, in that, just put the percent that's coming to you. You can put the total compensation. So let's go and use 6%. You can say, I'm going to put 6% here. You can say, you know what, I'm only going to do my side of it. I'm going to put 3.3% in here. You can decide what goes in there. That's the total compensation that in this agreement, the seller is agreeing to pay out. Okay? Line 120 or blank amount, whichever is greater, if seller sells or agrees to sell the property during the term of this contract. If seller agrees to pay buyer's broker compensation directly to the buyer's broker, that's this. Okay, so the first is our total compensation that they're paying out. This next part is if they decide to do this, right? It comes in the PA, they say, okay, we'll do it that way. If they decide to do it that way, then seller's obligation to pay broker's compensation as specified in lines 119 through 120 shall be reduced by the amount paid up to such and such dollars or percentage. That's in there because there are, in the PA now, there's going to be a spot that says seller will contribute to buyer's broker compensation blank amount. That might come, some of you on the buyer side may decide to always put an amount right in there to make sure you're getting paid, right? Some of you might not, because you'll call the agent on the other side and say, is there a compensation being shared? They'll say yes. You'll say, okay, I'll send you a form. We got that agreement. We're taking it outside the PA. But this language right here exists because if this says 6%, or this is that total amount that you were going to share, then you would say it reduces by whatever amount you were going to share here. If this was just your side, like you say, I'm going to put 3%, 3.3 in here, then this would be 0. This or this minus this equals what you're going to get paid. Think of it that way. This minus this is what your portion will be. Go ahead.
This might be a weird question. So if you, let's say you only put the total on there because you want to negotiate that during the PA.
So you only put your portion up here.
Yep,
Is that what you're saying?
yep.
Yep.
And then during the PA process, you want to negotiate that. Can you not fill out that part? On the
This right
listing
here?
side? Yeah.
So.
Or how does that work?
This is a separate agreement from the PA, so it makes sense to have all that conversation done with your client before they receive a PA. Right? I thought I had, oh,
Let's say you
There.
have that conversation, right? But you're like, but at the time of when we get offers in, like that we might see different things. So can you do that differently
you
there, or
can-
do you want to do that?
you can amend an agreement at any time.
Okay.
But you want to have the decision made beforehand.
Okay.
Here's my portion, or we're compensating both sides. This tells us if we're compensating both sides, whatever you pay out is going to reduce by the amount I'm sharing, right? If we're compensating my side only, whatever you pay out doesn't reduce my side at all. Make sense? Kelly?
Real number, are you allowed? Can you just?
No TBDs.
Okay.
No.
Well, no, I'm just saying like right now, can you like put $5,000, like just so we can understand the math a little better, like an real
Yeah.
number example?
Yeah,
That's
so, yes,
yeah.
yeah, sellers will pay broker compensation 6%. Okay? Of the selling price, or whatever zero higher, you can always put 0 because 6% will always be higher. Yeah, never mind. Or you can say, you know what, I charge $15,000 to sell a house. Whether it's $1 million house or it's a $250,000 house, whatever, you can decide, whichever is greater. If seller sells or agrees to sell the property during this term of the contract, if the seller agrees to pay buyer's broker compensation directly to the buyer broker, then the seller's obligation to pay broker's compensation as specified in line 119 to 120 shall be reduced by the amount of, I would put NA and I would put this in here, reduced by 2.7%.
Thank you.
Question.
Yeah, I think having numbers in there so we can.
Yeah, 6% reduced by 2.7% because that's what we're paying out.
That would feel like prior to August. That would feel like how we would fill it out prior to August.
It's very, yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
All right, in fact, still prior to August, like I said, the contract doesn't really change. It's just it's another way of saying, hey, we got to communicate this, right? Especially since the PA now will include a line that says sellers to compensate buyers, broker, blank and white. Line 129, cooperating broker compensation. Remember, you're having a conversation. This is on the PA already. Looks a little different, but you're having a conversation with what happens to that amount up there, that 6%. If you pay out separately, mine is reduced by 2.7%. You also have this cooperating broker commission. Of the total broker's compensation, broker shall or shall not, if it's 6%, let's assume you're sharing out. If it's 3.3%, let's say you're not sharing out, shall not offer compensation to cooperating brokers. If shall, the compensation to cooperating brokers shall be as follows. Check box 131, 2.7% of selling price or $0, whichever is greater to the cooperating broker representing the buyer. Assisting the buyer as facilitator or helping whatever that piece is. That's the change. The spot that gets confusing is this one. And by the way, it was confusing to a ton of brokers as well. This is just making clear of the total compensation. If you offer it on the PA, you're reducing mine or you're not reducing mine. Right? And you got to know as listing agent as well, right? So if you have this on your contract where it says shall, you're paying out 2.7% and they're paying out 2.7% here, that's possible, right? So if you receive an offer and you already agreed to be paying out in a co-op and you get an offer that says seller shall compensate buyer's agent 2.7%, you got to go, hold up, we're going to cross that part off because I already agreed to compensate here, right? So you got to look and go, hey, they're going to be somewhat restricted because they have an agreement what they can be paid out. But that 2.7%, you don't want to pay out. You don't want them to already be paying you an amount that you were planning on sharing, plus them having to pay out more. Because you're a fiduciary to your client, right? All of the other listing, part of the listing agreement is the same, except this part. This is written, this is purchase agreement. Any questions about that? Listing contract, everyone's good? You want to show a property, what do you need to have?
One-time showing agreement.
Any kind of agreement, right? You have to have some kind of written agreement that you're gonna get compensated, this is how you're compensated to go. Okay? What are the 3 ways that a buyer can pay you? Or pay the commission? One is co-op. Next, seller, or next is buyer. Can the buyer flat out finance their payment to you? No, they can't. However, on the PA, it can be written, sellers are paying buyer brokerage a 3%. That's not going to the buyer, that's going to you. And seller will contribute 3% to closing costs. Those things can both be on there, which is 6%, but the Fed has said it's okay for lending reasons. Good? Questions online? Questions in here?
I have a question, of course.
Okay, go.
I'm wondering if we already have paperwork signed
Yeah.
for our listing,
Yep.
then what happens? What happens after August 15th? I mean, if like, say my listing is gonna get moved back to the end of August, so that's after that, when all these changes happens.
Yep.
What do we have to do? Is there an amendment we have to do? What do we need to do?
So a contract that you have established right now is a valid contract. You're not obligated to change that contract. It's valid. As a seller, if my property is not yet on the market, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I would want to know what are my options for compensation, right?
Yeah.
If it were me, if I had a listing that was about to go live, I'd want to maybe say, hey, I just want to reach out. You've probably been aware that there's some changes coming in real estate. One of them is how we're compensated. I know that we already have a co-op agreement, which I think is the best way to do that, and I'll continue to pay out 2.7%. You also now on the PA, they made a change to the PA where it says that the seller can directly compensate the buyer's agent, part of the agreement. So you'll see that. I'm just curious, are there any changes you'd like to make on our current agreement? Do we need to miss it? Are you comfortable, right? The spot that we want to make sure that we do is that we're transparent, that we're communicating. People understand how we're getting paid, what's happening to the percentage. And you also might want to say, because I'm sure they're seeing it in different spots. Hey, just so you know, the MLS is going to look a little different. And one of the things we can't do is just share commissions anymore on that MLS. I know you already agreed to pay out 2.7%, so I tell you what, if you can't advertise it there, we're going to advertise it this way and make sure people see it, right? It's just kind of, so you don't have to. Your agreement is a legally binding agreement, but there might be an opportunity to develop some conversation. However, if you have shown a house to a person and you don't yet have a buyer representation agreement, you need to stop showing them a house till they sign stuff. Oh, you've never made me sign something before. I get it. Now I'm bound to. Before I was just putting myself at risk of you never paying me and not needing to pay me. Now actually, I would be violating the rules and I could get in trouble for that. Good.
Here's another Zoom question.
Another Zoom question.
Do you think this will become the norm to deal with buy side only when the PA comes in? Or that compensating both sides right out of the gate will increase the chances of the house selling? This is a tough decision for a listing agent. Easier to get a listing agreement signed at 3.3%, but harder to get people in the door if you aren't offering buyer compensation up front. Harder to sell the home.
Do I think it will become the norm that that the seller compensates the buyer's broker on a purchase agreement? Maybe it might. We know that some brokerages are going to say, this is the way we're going to do it. And we're going to see it. We're going to see, does it work? Does it not work? Do I think that there's an opportunity to continue to be the one that's co-op sharing upfront on co-op? 100%. And I know people are going to do it. And I want to see the results of that. Is that good? Is that great for our industry? Is that how we're going to continue to do it? Because it really is the best way to do it. The MLS and the Minnesota real estate attorneys, they're all like, the rules are changing, and they're changing from April to now, and we're writing forms that we don't even have an agreed settlement yet. Like, we know that everyone went and agreed to some terms, but it hasn't been finalized yet. Things might change again. We just don't know. But I do think that it's our opportunities as realtors to go, we are transparent. No matter what way of doing this people want to do, we share what the options are. The Minnesota realtors, attorneys, were sharing that their buyer brokers agreements, they had to share with other states because the other states didn't have anything. And they're like, how are we supposed to do this? So we're way ahead in some places, and we'll just see how it goes. Bethany, what are you going to do?
Well, I have a thought on,
Okay.
I would encourage people to not look at it as it's going to be more challenging to sell homes and market homes. Because remember that even though the buyer broker payout is on the MLS right now, buyers don't know to pay attention to that. So you're gonna market homes exactly the same way
Yep.
to the consumer.
To the consumer.
It's going to shift where now you can't, it's going to add more work. We talked about this as a team this morning. There will be additional steps on how we market it to other agents.
Yep.
But how you're marketing it to the consumer will not change.
Right. And that's perfectly true. And I want to say something on the agent side. It's wrong, has always been wrong, will continue to be wrong to not show a property because the compensation isn't where you want it to be on the front end. Your agreement is not with the seller, your agreement, which you'll have, is with the buyer. So if a buyer says to you, hey, Kevin, don't show me any homes where we cannot get the seller to pay. I don't have the additional cash. Then you could say, okay, put that in writing and I won't show you any of those homes. I would say instead, well, let's look at every house and see what we can do to get that paid for. If in the agreement we can't come to terms, then we move on, right? The idea that, and we gotta be careful with it, but there is something about, hey, buyer's compensation being advertised is gonna bring people in, right? If I'm paying out a 3.5%, I might get someone that's, I might get more people that are paying out 2.7%. That might be true, but it has to be true to the benefit of your buyer, not to you, right? So careful. Yes. Yes.
Do the co-op and you put that information into like 119.
Yeah.
All the way down to like 131 as well, you like repeat the information, correct?
Yes. Yep. And I kind of wish they would have like took that co-op spot ahead of the 122 spot, because I think it makes more sense to have that conversation afterwards, but they didn't, and that's okay. Yep. All right, ready for the PA?
Will there ever be a spot on the MLS where it lets them know if they paid out a commission or not?
So that's like if it tracked it, like there was, like
at
if
the
they
end,
tracked
so we can look
closing
at it
costs.
later.
Yeah, so it tracks closing costs, you can see on there. They don't have that set up yet. I think they're waiting to see kind of how things go, and then they want to start tracking stuff. Right now, that the North Star and Minnesota Realtors are like on super busy trying to figure out what can we do, what can we can't not do. I think all that back end stuff will come later.
I don't know if you want to talk about just, will appraisers have that? I mean, they'll see the PA, so they'll know whether that's in addition
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, and I think, you know, this was talking to Eric too, we might get to a spot where everything is just super smooth. It just goes on, everything's wonderful, and no one really has to make it huge changes that they feel it, right? Other thought could be, wow, all of a sudden homes aren't appraising anymore. And then what happens is when there's a problem, then people respond and come up with a solution. So, the appraiser is supposed to be unbiased and do an appraisal. And sometimes you get the appraisal that has nothing to do with purchase price, and you can see, and sometimes that appraisal comes right in at purchase price. And you're like, that's not that hard of a job. You just look at a purchase price. Do we think there's value in it? Okay, we're gonna go somewhere at the spot. So we'll see. If we're asking for 6% in a PA and the appraiser looks at that, I think we might see some appraisals that come in lower, but remember at the same time, banks need people to buy houses, right? So we'll see what happens. I think everyone's kind of in a spot where we're going, yeah, we'll see. Okay. But that was brought up, Jelena, because that would help us on comparable in other places. Yeah. Go ahead.
Do you know when it gets closed out in MLS? Is it gonna show what the payout was so that we can factor
No.
that in? No.
Not yet. That was brought up too, because the same thing is, wait, we want to have some data on what's happening in the actual value of the home. But not right now. There's not a section that says seller compensated, buyer's broker this amount.
But the seller's closing compensation or them giving towards closing costs would be.
Well, yeah, closing cost is already in there, right? So closing cost is gonna be in there, compensation to the other agent is not necessarily in Make sense? All right, here's the purchase agreement. Purchase agreement does not have a ton of changes. First page, exactly the same. Second page, exactly the same. Third page, written statement. How many of you love the 2-question written statement piece? I hate it, right? It's not super helpful. They changed it. So what that means is prior to you receiving written statement, right? For financial reasons, if a lender prior to receiving financially written statement says they can't qualify, the first question was, what happens to that earnest money? Right? Refunded to the buyers oftentimes. The second question is, let's say we got this written statement and it didn't close. Now what happens to the money? And that's what this is. And now it just says, upon delivery of a written statement, you have the written statement and it doesn't, as stated on the closing date, for any reason related to financing, doesn't close, the money is then forfeited to the seller. If you give written statement, it doesn't close for financial reasons, money is forfeited to the seller. That's what it says in here. We took away the check boxes. Good? DBA funding fee. One-time funding fee based on the loan amount not otherwise waived must be paid at closing costs. Remember, there are things that the DBA didn't allow. There's that right there. They've taken that away. They've taken the DBA had to be co-op agent. You were getting paid by the co-op agent. Now they're allowed to compensate. This line 233, notwithstanding the foregoing, buyer shall assume any levied assessments that cannot be paid in the year of closing. If it can't be paid in the year of closing, it's yours, right? We have this long thing driven out, can't be paid in the year of closing, it becomes the buyer's. Good? All the same, all the same, all the same. Here's the fun part. And this makes things simple. And this is going to be really important that you're checking this and including in your net spot because it's apart from all the offers, right? All that money thing is now way down here. By the way, if you have a template, when you submit a PA and you have a template of all your things, this will be a line that you're going to want to include on there. Seller's contribution to buyer's broker compensation. Right? That's not in there right now, but that you're gonna want to have in there. And this in 405 says seller agrees to pay buyer's broker's compensation at closing blank % or the selling price or blank. So this would be, if it were me and we were doing this spot, I would write in and representing this buyer, I would write in there 3%. One of the opportunities for me to make more money as a buy side agent is to have this and put it right on the contract. I don't care what you're willing to share out to me. You owe seller me 3%. Right on the purchase agreement there for everyone to see as part of the party. So now I just got myself a 0.3% raise because now I'm not going with whatever the co-op says. I'm doing this one. Questions?
So is this just gonna make more dickering back and forth? And are we, as the selling agents, gonna have to really look out for that and go, geez, you know what? You were getting 2.7, now you're asking for 3%. Now it's a, counter type of thing. Is that, I don't know. Is this gonna get to be even more of a pain?
Sure. It's another term that you're negotiating. So if you look at a term as a pain, then it's a pain. If you look at it as this is just another term, then it's not a pain.
Okay.
And if you're the listing agent, you're gonna look at it and go, hey, let me look and see what the net is. Let's see if this makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, and because this is on the PA, this is a negotiation between the buyer and the seller. This is not my negotiation, right? I'm the buyer's rep. I already know what the buyer is going to pay me. this is not my opportunity to make more money. This isn't whatever. This is the buyer and seller now negotiating how much the seller is compensating my cost, right? So if they're offering 2.7%, I'm a 3% cost. My buyer might say, you're gonna pay 0.3% toward, because I'm already seeing the compensation over here from the co-op. Now I'm asking you, the seller, to pay an additional 0.3% towards my cost. So a buyer's agent's commission could come through this and this, right? There's a spot in the same way it could have on your co-op. Nothing's really changed. If I saw sometimes on our MLS paying out 2.5%. If my commission with my agreement with my buyer is they pay me 2.7%, and can I charge them 0.2%? 100%. It's already in our agreement. It doesn't matter what you're paying out. They just agreed to pay out a portion of mine. That's the same here. Now, I used to say, if I like the person, I'm not going to charge them another spot. If they were really a pain in the butt, bet I'm putting it on. And then I tell the lender, by the way, that person always also owes me this, so that they understand they gotta bring some cash to close. Good?
No. So, sorry if you already said this, but
I repeat.
so if you're on if you already have it on the listing agreement that you're the top one, number one, co-op, you're
Yep.
sharing commission, do you fill it, and the agent, the buyer's agent calls and says, are you offering commission? Listing agent says, yes, I'm offering 2.7%. Does the buyer agent fill that blank out?
Put 0 there, right?
Because it's already.
I already know how I'm getting compensated, because it's in writing from the other agent. It's in writing before you submit a PA that they're gonna compensate you. It's in what? Writing. And there's a form on here that I'm trying to get to.
Because on the listing agent took that agreement, they already agreed upon paying out a co-op percentage.
Right, if on their listing agreement, they have, they selected the buyer payout or the co-op way. They probably shared it with you. You probably know how you're gonna do it. Make sure, remember, just because it's on their contract and they put it on a piece of marketing, you have nothing binding with them that they're going to pay you. So make sure you have something in writing before you submit your PA, because they might accept your PA and not have a way for you to get paid. Now all of a sudden your buyer owes you that money directly. They're upset with you, all those kind of things.
So would you,
You just fill that in, and no matter what.
yeah.
Document both sides.
So,
Or is that double?
well, here's the thing. Here's why I would not put it there. I would not put it there if I know there's compensation, because I know that listing agent is going to now have to explain and expect now I have to have a counter back. If I want this thing to close and be super smooth, I call the listing agent and say, hey, are you paying out? Yeah, Kevin, we're paying out 2.7. That's fantastic. That's the agreement I have right here. I'm going to give you a super clean PA that all your client has to do is sign it, and we're on our way to closing. If they say, no, we're not, or if I don't make that call and they have communicated, now I send them a PA and they have to send a counter back. What do you bet there's something else that's being countered besides just that commission? Right? So that's why I don't write it on there all the time. However, I'm making sure I get paid every time. So that's the spot where I would be.
So that blank is used for really line 2 and 3, your options 2 and 3 up there.
What?
On whiteboard?
Option 2 is
whiteboard.
the purchase agreement.
Yes,
Line.
option 2 is on the PA. So this is, this is long. This right here is co-op agreement, right? So I want to have something in writing, not PA.
Is there a form for that?
It's on the screen.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so there's this form right here, which really is the cleanest way to do it. However, if we're in a seller's market, by the way, we're talking a little bit about, I don't remember what I was talking about, maybe Derek and Jelena, I think we were talking about the timing of this. Could you imagine if we had to make these changes when the seller's market was like boom, 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 we all were receiving multiple? It's kind of nice that it's cooled down a bit and now we have some space to do these kind of things and work through it. This is the cleanest way to do it. It lays it out clearly. You have that in there. In a quick weekend spot where you're like, hey, I want to get this, my client really wants to get this out. Just make sure I have a response in writing. To be clear, you'll be paying out a blank percent at closing, correct? Yep, that's correct. Binding agreement. Good?
Can I just give an idea?
Yeah.
We're talking about how do we scale this, how do we simplify it? And so my encouragement would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but this only needs to be signed by you as the listing agent, even though it says broker, Kevin said
Yep.
it for our office, you as the listing agent can sign it.
Right.
One of my end of day tasks, if I were a solo agent, and one of our operations end of day tasks for our virtual assistant is going to be look at our showings for the next day and send them this copy in advance. Because then the purchase agreement, for exactly what you're saying, the purchase agreement they write, it would be factored in and it would be something that could just be handled. Now, let's say, because there are agents, and we talked about this morning too, where we are so lucky that we have Kevin and an office with support and Kelly with profile and people that we can brainstorm around like best tips on this. The average agent is not going to have that. And so being kind as a co-op agent and calling Kevin and saying, hey, are you offering, like if he was a co-op, hey, are you offering a buyer broker payout? Yeah, we are. Awesome. Any chance you can send that to me in writing in advance, because I want to make sure that that's reflected in the purchase agreement we send. Do you by chance have this form already signed? 'Cause I know you said technically if it's in an email it counts. I'm personally gonna be careful and I would prefer to see.
Yeah.
But still, I would just encourage everyone, like, know that we are ahead of the game by having these conversations. And the reason brokerages like the one that's saying just don't offer it is because they're trying to remove a lot of the extra steps. Like they want it all to just be in the negotiation on the PA.
Can this form be a supplement on the MLS or in showing time? Can it be a supplement in showing time? No.
It cannot be, you can't, no, because it goes blanket to everyone, and you can't do that. That's the problem, is if you just put it out there for everyone to have the same agreement, that's what they don't wanna have. Now, you could, I love what Bethany said, and even if that other, agent isn't up to date, you can say, hey, I'm gonna send you a form that just makes that clear. I have it all filled out for you, all I need is your signature on it, we'll be good to go. So, you might wanna create a template. If you took Kelly's template class, you would have some templates, they're already. It's really handy.
Are you asking if the seller is then willing to pay out a commission during that conversation?
Okay, so
Now you're
call
asking
me,
about turns.
buyer's
Hey,
agent, listing agent.
Kevin, this is Jelena Mo. We're showing your house. Just curious if you're paying out a co-op commission for this property.
Julian, I'm really excited about you selling the property. It's fantastic. My sellers, decided not to do it the co-op way. But there's a spot on the PA. If you want to put it on there, we can have some negotiation. All good?
Yeah.
They're aware that that's one of the things that might be part of the offer.
I love that script back because some agents might not realize it's on the new PA.
I think more people will respond with, no, we're not, submit an offer is what they're gonna respond with versus, sure, we're willing to negotiate. I mean, it's always a negotiation, right? I understand that, but,
Will you say it one more time?
Call me in.
hey, Kevin. Hey, Kevin, I was just curious if you were, paying a co-op commission for this property.
Hey, Julian, I'm really excited that you're bringing some buyers to the house. My clients have decided not to go the co-op rate, but there's a spot right on the PA if you want to negotiate.
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks, Kevin.
So
Oh,
Kevin?
Yeah.
Just was wondering if, oh shoot, sorry. Wondering if their is something that maybe our brokerage might be able to write up for us as when we are listing a property to, so that, you know, if we're gonna have good buyer's agents saying, hey, could you send me that in writing? Just to make sure that we are putting that in writing correctly. Will there be something that our brokerage will put together for us or something?
How about the co-op broker agreement? You probably can't see it on the screen, but there's one right there that's easy to fill out. And that would be just great for our, like, the legal,
Okay.
this is a great one. So that will work right there.
Oh, look at that. Okay, thank you.
So what I want you to hear, is we as a brokerage are not telling you, you have to do it this way. We're not telling you you have to do it this way. We're not telling you you have to do it this way. Okay? We're also not telling you you have to charge a certain percentage. Right? We have had a policy that says in our brokerage, we pay out 2.7%. I believe that has been beneficial for our industry. I believe that there will be some agents out there who will say, we are not compensating the buyer's agent. And they're gonna tell their seller why that's the best way to do it. I strongly disagree that that's the best way to do it. And when they start to get offers that are no longer, that people start to pull their offer because a buyer has to pay directly out of pocket, that's going to correct itself. We might have some outliers in the beginning that are just horrible to work with. Remember, you get to choose to who you work with. And also remember, in order for the industry to work, we have to co-op with each other well. We have to cooperate with each other well.
Phone call doesn't go quite the way we want it to.
Yeah, hey, we're not paying out a
We're
PA.
not paying it, we're not negotiating that.
Yeah.
Are you willing to negotiate potentially? And they say no.
Yep.
Then what's the conversation going back to my client? Hey, they're not even, I still want to show them this home, right? If they're.
Yeah, I would just say, hey, I want you to understand that currently I'm not getting compensated, and should they accept an offer, you owe me the 3%. Oftentimes what I know is that what I do know is every listing agent must present every single offer. I don't care what the listing agent just told me, if they're gonna put it on there or not. We're gonna put it right on there because my job is to be your fiduciary and we're gonna get this deal done. And if we can't get them to do it, they stick to their guns, we'll go find another house. Right? It's terms and conditions. It's the house, the property they want, but do they want it at this price? Well, we gotta figure out how we can reduce their price 3%. Or how they don't have to bring 3% more.
And if you know, multiple offers, and then the seller might take bad advice from an agent.
Right. And by the way, on the buy side, if we're in multiple offers, think about all those buyers that were willing to pay way more for a house than the bank said it's worth. Right? Things drive things. If I had a client who was willing to pay $20,000 more than appraised cost, do you think that client is also probably willing to pay my 3% in order to get the offer accepted? Probably so, and they probably have the ability to do so, right? So it's just different. It's not bad. It's just different. We just gotta kind of have the answers to how we're gonna respond to this.
Karen has her hand
But
raised.
never ever, I would say never ever don't submit an offer because they say we're not negotiating. Well, fine, we'll give it to you, reject us. Who has it? Terry?
Terry.
Hey, yeah. I was just wondering if, like you're saying, you know, some brokerages are saying we're not gonna pay out and all that kind of thing, deals can fall apart. Would that be considered just a financial thing so that the earnest money isn't gonna go away? You know what I'm saying?
Question, when does earnest money need to be submitted?
Well, it needs to be submitted within 48 hours of it being,
Of what?
of the offer being accepted.
Accepted, so I wouldn't have an offer even accepted if we didn't have if I didn't know how I was getting paid. So that doesn't, because of the timeline, the earnest money doesn't even come into play on until we know how I'm getting paid.
Okay, Okay, I was just wondering if there was like a situation where they thought they were gonna be able to pay that amount and then something wonky happened and they go, man, I just can't afford to get this, do the down payment and if it came up, you know what I'm saying?
Gotcha. Gotcha. So then, right, I wanna know how I'm getting paid. If my buyer is barely qualified to buy this house, and all of a sudden they have to bring 3%, guess who I'm calling? The lender. Does this person have the ability to close on this, right? Because they're under contract with me too, so they would have to make sure I get paid. I'm not gonna tell a listing agent they can buy the house if they can't really buy the house.
Gotcha. Okay.
It is 12:05. These forms change. Am I teaching next week?
On the 20th.
On the 20th, so the forms will change prior to that. I looked on the MLS to see if the new forms were on there. They're not yet. There's actually one on there. I'm not gonna tell you which one it is, but if you look like 8/24, you'll see there's one on there.
You're excited.
I am excited.
They're popping up because I'm getting questions.
Do you want to teach us again next week?
I'm more than willing to teach it, and I am available to answer any questions along the way. When I say to you, if you get stuck on the form, what should you do? Read it, right? That's not I'm unavailable to help you on it. It's just, I want you to understand what it's saying. I was on Dana Murray's team. Kelly was like the person that developed, Dana and Kelly, I'll give them both equal credit, developed me in real estate. And I couldn't go out and meet with a single person until I could turn the forms upside down and explain to you exactly as Bethany did in her buyer's consult without even having the form in front of her, of this is what is in there. This is what is in there. So if you call questions and ask me questions, I'll often say to you, what does it say? It says this. Okay, now I'm happy to process what that means. But sometimes the contract is as simple as, well, what does it say? Just read it again. And if we all commit to that, that makes things a lot easier. But I'm always willing to answer questions, and especially as changes happen. Go ahead.
Did you say that this is not in effect till the 20th, not the 15th?
No, so the 15th, everything changes on the MLS on the 15th. On the 17th is when everything is legally binding. So if these forms get on there now, in the interim, I would suggest if you're gonna take a new listing and the forms are on there, use the newest form. We can start using them as soon as they come out, and they should come out August 1st, so. That's good, that's today.
They're usually pretty prompt with the forms on the first.
Yeah. I looked, there was only one, so I think you're right. They're probably just dropping. All right, any other questions? This good? Good. Good. Awesome.
Thank you.
My pleasure, sir. My pleasure.